All right. Good morning, everybody on the West Coast of the United States, and good evening to everybody on India and this region in Asia and the different parts of the day for all the rest of you. Okay, so thank you all for joining. This is going to be an exciting webinar. It's going to be a really exciting discussion. It has to do with the book introducing the Rising to the Top book. And there's several of the people who are part of that book who are going to be featured today, but I'm not going to do much of the talking. We have Professor Deborah Blaine, who is an associate professor in mechanical and mechatronics engineering at Stellenbosch University in South Africa. So she will take over from me and coordinate the rest of the session. Thank you, David, for doing this, and I'm going to quit.
Thanks so much, Krishna. So welcome everybody to this March month celebration of our book series, Rising to the Top. And March is a special month. The 4th of March was the UNESCO International Engineering Day, and yesterday was International Women's Day. So it is really a perfect time for us to celebrate this book series that shares stories and journeys of women around the world who are engineers and who have made it into this tough environment through different ways and facing different challenges. So today we have 5 panelists, including myself, who will be speaking about their stories and the challenges that they've met. But also today on International Women's Day, for yesterday, we also know that in Europe at the moment, our colleagues and friends are experiencing a very stressful time and a time of deep unhappiness. And so with that in mind, IFEES GEDC, we would like to just spend a few seconds of silence to just stand in solidarity with all of our colleagues in engineering education around the world and especially in Europe. Okay, thank you. So our first panelist is unfortunately not online yet, but I'm going to introduce her, Madhu Chikara, because I'm hoping that during the webinar she manages to sign on. So Madhu Chikara is the Pro-Chancellor of Chikara University, a university that she started with her husband in India, and she really is a trailblazer for engineering education in India and globally, and her story can be found in the 3rd volume of Rising to the Top that focuses on women in engineering in India. Our second panelist is Renata Towle. She is UC Davis's first Vice Chancellor of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, and a champion for equity in STEM. So she's based in the USA, and her story can be found in Rising to the Top Volume 1. Our third panelist is Lydia Zakowska. Her story can be found in Rising to the Top Volume 2. She's a professor of transport engineering at Krakow University of Technology Civil Engineering faculty and a founding member of Women in Engineering. And today she is signing in from Poland. And then myself, Krishna has already introduced me, and my story can be found in Rising to the Top Volume 4, and I'm based in Stellenbosch, South Africa. And then finally, we have our panelist, Apiwa Hotele, and she is a rising star in STEM. She's a South African young lady who has started her own company, Luminous, that helps provide educational support in STEM in South Africa, and she's won so many awards in South Africa for her entrepreneurial spirit and her dedication to excellence. So we're hoping that very soon we will have Apiwa's story in a Rising to the Top series as well. And she is here today to represent our young engineers who are right in the middle of their journey of rising to the top, although she's already exceeded so many ceilings. Okay, so I am now going to stop sharing my screen There I go. And then we can just go straight to the panel discussion. So Krishna, can you just confirm that my screen is no longer shared?
Yes. You can see big
Okay.
pictures of all of you.
Okay. Okay, great. So what I would like to start off now, in all of these stories, our panelists have been asked to reflect on their journey in engineering and what were the formative things that happened, especially from the context of being a woman in engineering. So I read each of our panelists' chapters, and one of the common themes that I saw in all of their stories is that these are women who haven't stood around and waited for somebody else to be the trailblazer. They are people who embody the concept of be the change you want to see. So I'm not going to explain their different stories because I'm hoping that each of them will do that in their turn to talk. But the basic question that I would like to start off now is, how did you find the courage and energy to keep on facing a prejudiced and unequal world that resists change? And how do you find the motivation to swim upstream and change your environment for the better? Okay, so I'm trying to see, where are my attendees? Okay, so is there anybody who would like to start with addressing this question? Unfortunately, for some reason, I can't see all the attendees, so I'm trying to sort that out. So maybe Krishna, you could
Lydia's going to start us off.
Renetta, are you going to start?
Is here, and
No, Lydia's going to start us off.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you for invitation to this very special journey through the Rising to the Top book, not only to me, but especially to read and to hear all other stories from all over the world. I'm from Poland, and this is a very special place on the map of Europe, not only right now when we have this difficult time and struggling for refugees, but we just observe, and this is composed in one whole story, in fact, since the very beginning. You know, if you want to understand what happened in that part of the world, Poland as well, and Russia, Ukraine, etc., we were over the European curtain. And only recently, looking from the history, we came back to the European community in 2004. Since that time, we just realize and compose and see what is the difference between the general education in those countries where women were not really neglected or not invited to study whatever they wanted. For example, to me, studying engineering, I was the first one in a family, not my father, no, my mother. My mother was historian of art, my father was an economist. They were university degrees, but not engineering. And the thing was, okay, just go on. If you are talented, no problem. But the things started to be difficult as I realized during the next steps of the career. I mean, we have the same number of women and men studying engineering, but then the proportion of in success of our engineering profession is that only men or majority of men are welcome to take the leadership position and to make a success, and women are just staying on the position of you still have to more to be at home and to be the second type of the person, no matter if you are more talented, so always men will be chosen for the better place. And in my civil engineering and transportation career, university career at Krakow University, even till now, after so long time of this evolution of gender equality talks, we still have only 5 rectors are men, and majority of all those, deans or whatever, And those guys are very much interested in not changing this situation, just to keep power. So the same is probably in, let's say, Ukraine, or was in Soviet Union, now in Russia by now, when guys really think that they are the only one with the right topics. How was in my position? From the distance, from the perspective of time, I can say that if I were a man and do the same things about my research and education and all the publication, whatever, this would be at least twice faster, my career to professorship, than when I'm a woman. So I had to wait all the time, 5 times longer, and my works were something like do something extra in 10 years more, make another project, maybe it's not a time for you. First of all, it's always too early because you have children. After that, it's too fast because maybe you should stay at home and do some other things. Maybe you will be not available. And those rules were necessary. I started from international projects, those, let's say, empowerment, how to speak aloud about gender equality in engineering. And it started from 2008, when within World Federation of Engineering Organization, we opened the very first standing committee of women in engineering. And then in some way, I got the power to show that it's not my own idea that I do not like my men colleagues at university, but simply that it's a total important and well evaluated everywhere new look, new view, new path for everyone, for men and women. So after that, I came into research, European research projects, which were a huge programs for gender equality plans and for making equality in transportation. And this was a struggle, but I got the power because of, not because of my husband, who was absolutely not supporting it, He was getting mad and angry about how can you deal with such a stupid topics. The same with my close colleagues, men professors, what the topic it is, it's not engineering, what are you discussing about? This is all the stupid things, these are emotions, not science, etc. Maybe today is not like that, but still it's not easy. I mean, we didn't cross all the barriers. We know that it takes time, but international cooperation helped me a lot and gave me this, to cooperate with fantastic women who have this power already, who are brave because we are a group and because we can speak as a group. That was the most important thing. And that would be my short answer to this question.
Great. Thank you so much, Lydia. I think for me, maybe 10 years ago, I was at a leadership workshop or something like that, and I met some women who were in leadership positions, and it suddenly just occurred to me that everything doesn't have to happen now, and that I still have many years ahead of me in my career, and that I can be patient for it to roll out. At the same time, I think this is not something that men necessarily have to be patient for. They can go and grab it right now. And that's something that came through to me with your story, is your resilience and your patience in never giving up and just carrying on and just believing that what you were doing was important and real and carrying on. So I salute you in your resilience.
So it is.
Renetta, do you have something to add in this regard? about
I
swimming
do. I
upstream.
do. Thank you. And it was really wonderful to hear Lydia's story. Thank you for sharing, Lydia, and thank you for going first and for starting us off. So I come from a context in the United States, and right now I'm in California on the western coast of the United States, but I grew up on the East Coast in New Jersey. I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on the East Coast, in the mid-Atlantic region of the US. And I think that an interesting part of my story, and you mentioned this, Professor Blaine, is that I grew up sort of in this time of the United States where there were a lot of civil rights, people were coming out of the civil rights. I'm a child of the 70s and 80s. And my parents had been at Howard University. They were first generation college students. And at Howard University, they had been at the March on Washington with Martin Luther King. And so I was born sort of with these, young parents who were coming out of this civil rights movement and now trying to make it on their own as young professionals with children, and sort of breaking out of different kinds of molds of having a family, of moving to certain parts of town that later changed because people didn't want to necessarily live in a place that had a lot of Black or African American people who were living in the neighborhoods. And I think a lot of my success, certainly there's a faith piece there, which I'll talk about, but there are structures. There was the structure of my family. There was the structure of neighborhood and church and people who were part of civic organizations that my parents were in. And then there were structures within the school. And so it's interesting because in my position now as a Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at a public university in California, I really am appreciating the importance of having structures in place. So I was a product of public schools going through New Jersey, and one of the programs that was in my public school was called Project Seed. It was an after-school program that taught fourth graders advanced math. And so we learned about algebra in fourth grade in this particular after-school program. I remember to this day, Ms. Hartman, who was teaching us the Fibonacci sequence in fourth grade, learning about factorials in that grade. And so this was a project that was brought to public schools, and it was being brought to make sure that people who were considered to be historically marginalized, we used to use the term minorities, we don't use that term as much anymore, but I was in programs like that, minorities in engineering, sort of all the way throughout my schooling. But I was in that program in fourth grade. I was in another program in seventh grade that was called Minorities in Engineering. That was through a county college, which is the equivalent in New Jersey. The county colleges are the equivalent of a community college or a two-year institution, where they would have buses of students and take them to the community college, and you would listen to panels of leaders in engineering. You would get exposed to going to different laboratories and just looking at the facilities and so forth. In high school, I had an opportunity to be in several different kinds of programs, and I had some unique teachers in math. I will always remember that my calculus teacher was the type of teacher in high school who taught us by sitting down. He sat down and he would have us go to the board, and he had a room full of blackboards, and we would all have our space on the board. And it was a mentoring, teaching kind of atmosphere where he would give us a problem and we would try to work it out, and he would come around, and sometimes he would sort of point and talk to us from his chair and tell us what we needed to do, and we could ask our neighbors. So it wasn't a competitive kind of environment. It was very inclusive, where we all work together to try to make sure that everyone was getting the right answer. And as I went on to college, I went to Howard University, which is an historically Black university known as an HBCU. And there are several HBCUs in the same way that there are in the United States Hispanic serving institutions or tribal colleges. And for me, being at Howard University in engineering and HBCU with other Black students from all over the African diaspora was really important because it took the issue of race off of the table. And so to take race off of the table, where you didn't have to worry about whether or not you were being scrutinized because of your race, or there was discrimination because of race, we were there and we were taught that we were going to be leaders no matter what, that because of, in spite of our race, we were going to be leaders. And so just push for that at every level. Then going and being a member of NSBE, the National Society for Black Engineers, where you had thousands and thousands of people. And I saw people who looked like me who were now, I mean, they were going to graduate school. It's like graduate school, PhD, oh my goodness. And they were faculty members. And so having those kinds of structures and that kind of visual for me was just so important, because it gave me the strength, and I would say not only the strength, but the exposure to then venture out even further. I actually got into things like WEEF, the World Engineering Education Forum, and programs by IFEES, the International Federation for Engineering Education, because I was at a SHIP conference, which is the Society for Hispanic Professional Engineers, and I met Dr. Maria Laurando Petri, who is in charge of the Latin and Caribbean Consortium of Engineering Institutions. She invited me to come to Panama to give a talk about graduate school. At the time, I was working at UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. From that, I met other people in the International Global Engineering Society. She invited me to go to Colombia, to Cartagena. I went to my first WEEF conference and was blown away just seeing the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals up on the conference wall. And I saw all of these challenges that I said, this is what I want to do. I want to make sure that I'm using engineering to help to solve the challenges of the world. And meeting others just helped to, I guess, facilitate those kinds of things. And I could go on and on and on with my stories, but I'll stop there for now to give others a chance. And I know we'll have more time throughout to talk more.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing both in Lydia's story and your stories, Renetta, is this empowerment that you found from a young age with people who believed in you, despite maybe a society that was expecting less of you.
Yes.
And I think that those connections and that just having someone to see you and to believe in you is so important in those journeys. So I think this is one reason why I really love this book series, because it is sharing these stories. And like Lydia was saying, maybe 20 years ago, people would have said, this is not engineering, it's fuzzy and touchy-feely, but it's making a difference in the world. And I'm actually at a conference today, and what's so interesting to me is that the conversation, it's a competitive manufacturing conference, and the conversation today has been, finally, how do we bring people into engineering and manufacturing? And I'm going to claim that that is because women have been growing in their size and space in the engineering business. So all of these crazy ideas that women had in the past and that were labeled as not engineering have now become the core of the focus, in engineering for the use of humanity. So I salute you all in the journey. Apiwe, you are a young lady who has now been in your journey. I'd love for you to weigh in on what it's like for you in the world and at the moment, and how do you see yourself as a woman in STEM? Is Apiwe still online? I'm not sure.
in and out. She's having connectivity problems right now. She looks
She's
like she's out.
okay. So just for some context, Apiwe and I are both in South Africa, and South Africa currently has rolling blackouts or load shedding. So Apiwe was signing in from her cell phone device, and her internet connectivity was sketchy. So hopefully she'll be able to join us just now. So the next topic that
I think she's back. Apiwe, can you unmute yourself? Are you back? Apiwe? You can unmute yourself and speak. There you go. Come in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, there's Apiwe.
Apologies, I'm so sorry. And everything just happened at the right time. So electricity just literally got back.
See?
So I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Well, afternoon in South Africa, that is. Thank you so much for inviting me to the talk, and I'm quite excited to be part of the discussion. I've briefly been able to catch up on the ladies' stories as they were talking, but I've also read up your profiles. All three of you are really amazing, I must say, and very inspirational. So just to be in a conversation with the three of you on its own is really quite amazing. So my story is kind of like very similar, I could say. I grew up from the villages in Queenstown in the Eastern Cape, that is in South Africa. So our village is very cultural, obviously, and they're very clear about what the role of the women in society is. But interestingly, I think my parents took a rather different approach to raising us. We are 4 girls and 1 boy. So my dad's got a lot to deal with. And so growing up, so growing up, we had to look after, obviously, at home we had sort of like a mini farm, if I can call it. So we had cows and all of that, which, because we were the only girls that were available at the time, we had to herd, you know, your cows, your sheep, and so on. So I got used to, from a very young age, to doing things that would normally be done by boys. Because at home, the eldest is my sister, who's 2 years older than me, and then it's me. So then we had to then take care of that. However, growing up, both my parents are educators, and I think it's very important to mention this because they embedded the importance of education. They embedded the importance of being able to dream and see beyond what you are able to see with the naked eye, which sometimes I'm not sure if they did it deliberately or not, but I think that played quite an important role in the person that I am today. And I think also my parents also took us to a school outside of our village, to the nearest town. I'm not sure if that was quite a great idea, simply because the town itself is very racist town. So I think from a very young age, I was able to experience racism. And it was normalized to a point where you wouldn't necessarily tell that the people were being racist against you. And it took me a while to actually realize, like it took me getting out of the community, actually being able to see that we actually went through this and it was a trauma that we kind of had to overcome. So all of those things brought up together and constantly fighting for our place, because we had to fight for our place in the playground, because now we are in a space where there are men that are taking care of cows and we're not supposed to be there. And then you get to a school where that's full of Afrikaans students that speak Afrikaans, you can't speak Afrikaans, and you have to fight for a space there. And there it was quite different, because it was not even a question of, are you good enough as a woman? It was a question of, are you good enough as a Black person, period. You know, so it's a completely different fight. So I think from a very young age, I kind of realized the importance of, if I want to see change, I need to bring about the change I need to see. So what really drives me more than anything is, and gives me courage, is the fact of that if I'm not going to do it, then who is? Who do I expect to come in out of nowhere to solve the problems that I am encountering? You know, and growing up then and having a 10-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old nephew kind of molded that question to say, I would have failed as a mother if my daughter has to go through the same problems I went through. Then that means I didn't do anything. Then what was my role in the society? Then what was my role in the whole entire discussion? And I think those are the two things for me that really drive me. Each and every time when things get tough, I'm always like, yeah, what do I really want my daughter to go through this 3 years down the line? No. If I'm not gonna do it, then who is? Let me keep it moving. So I think that really what really drives me and gives me courage.
That's great. Thank you so much, Apiwe. I think a stark contrast between Apiwe and I, and is that well, I'm older than Apiwe, obviously, but I grew up in apartheid South Africa as a white person. So I'm on the other side of the privilege fence. And I haven't grown up with that assumption that I need to prove myself because of the color of my skin. But I did study in the United States. And Renetta, it was very interesting for me to read your story about your parents being activists, because a lot of my personal friends now in South Africa, their parents were activists and hiding their subversive movements from the secret police in the country. And I think, Lydia, you grew up also under an oppressive regime where the Polish people were trying to get their independence. And there's a kind of strength that comes from being underneath the system. And then there is also, it seems that there is a sense of responsibility that people feel to changing it, so that the people who've gone before them, where they are now, they need to make the world a better place. Whereas I think if you are already at the top of the pile, then what is your motivation for change? You're already in a good place. So that's why I think these beautiful, strong women are here today and being recognized is because they have found the strength. Thank goodness, you lovely ladies. Okay, so I think we've spoken already. So quite interestingly, you know, the one question was about being the change you want to see, and then I wanted to go in about the interpersonal relationships, but that directly came in with all of you speaking about how people have helped you along the way. But maybe we can speak a little bit about role models and mentors. So beyond just our families and our early childhood development, which seems to be critical, and maybe the message for us on an International Women's Day is that those of us who are mothers or aunts or godmothers or whatever role model you are, spending that time with those young, both boys and girls, to make them realize their power to activate change in the world is really critical. But maybe we can speak more a bit for a few minutes about some of the role models that we've had in terms of our professional careers. Does anybody want to start there?
I go first.
Absolutely.
I can go. So the whole thing around role models for me is very interesting, because from a very young age, you know, at school, when you do life orientation, every now and then you have to write about who your role model is and why that person is your role model and whatnot. And I remember vividly that every single time this question came up, I used to be so confused and like, who is my role model? But who is a role model? And so on. And to some degree, I still wonder. And I think it has kind of taken me to a point where I say my role models are actually my parents, and that's kind of like weird, but that's really it. And I think more than anything, it's the fact of that they were able to overcome what they were able to overcome at the time that they lived in, and they fought through their challenges. Both my parents have a very interesting story that every time they talk about it, I literally am in tears, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you guys did it. So I think from that perspective, those two people are actually my role models. And I think they really, how they raised us, knowingly or unknowingly, I don't know. I've actually never asked them this question. Because at home, from a very young age, we used to have meetings. So if there's going to be a drastic decision that they're going to make, they are going to call a meeting and we are going to discuss it and we are going to have a voice. So from a very young age, I knew that I have a voice. I mean, in most cases, if I'm telling you, a lot of the things we said were never done, but the fact that we're able to do them nonetheless was good enough, or the fact that we're able to say it and know that we are part of the discussion table, I think for us was actually good enough. And as a result, all of us are very vocal and outspoken people. And also the other thing my parents also did very well was, if you had a problem and you're coming to them and you're like, I've got a problem with this and this and this, and a lot of the times they would be like, yeah, but what are you going to do about it? You know, yeah, don't bring problems to the table. Tell us the solutions. How do you want to go forward with with whatever problem you have? And I think that's also an interesting trait that has kind of like molded me to be the person that I am. So in terms of interpersonal, or in terms of people that were important in your lives, I think my parents definitely. And then as time went by, I realized the importance of having a mentor. My very first manager for when I worked for the South African Radio Astronomy Observatory, and my very first manager was a Black guy that I'm still in contact with up until today, who has turned into a very good mentor of mine, who was very crucial in my career, I think, more than anything, because he had walked the path and he kind of understood a lot of things that I didn't understand and was able to be a sounding board. So I think mentors are really important. And then with time, I realized the importance of a coach as well. So now I have a professional coach who I think also is it's a very important person to have in your corner in terms of helping you shape your career and helping you shape your direction in terms of, I'm a very ambitious person. So I have a lot of ideas and I do a lot of things at the same time and a lot of the time. So it's good to have someone who's like, no, hold on, girl, you're gonna burn out. It's not gonna work. So I think, yeah, so I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Apiwe. Lydia?
Yes,
Yeah.
I must say I have a little bit different approach to role model, what it is. Because of several reasons, of course, because of the place we are situated, etc., what I'm doing about research. So in general, when I look at today's life in Europe, for example, there are no typical stereotype role models we were told it should be for our parents, grandparents, etc. Then why? Because the world changed. I mean, I do not think that my parents were role models because we were said, go up and choose your own path. Who is role model for me? Definitely, and majority of, let's say, our researchers, colleagues in engineers. There is Marie Curie. Okay, that was a woman born in Warsaw, and she got the only woman and the only person that got double two Nobel Prize, and her life is something unbelievably like role model, even it was 100 years ago. And in my family, I have from that time, from before the First World War and from between the First and the Second War, a couple of real role model women. You know, it was time that in Poland it was not permitted for women to study, but they could go abroad, like my pre-aunt coming to France in Paris to Sorbonne or to Boulogne. They were from, let's say, pretty noble families. They could afford to come with another women person to sit next to them at the lectures. They could get PhD, but they came back like a doctor of medicine and could not work in Warsaw. She had no possibility that women will work like a medical doctor. So she went to Serbia from Galicia. Anyway, the history is fantastic, but these are a tiny, simple showing that is a process. Who is my today's role model? The women who are who get into wise power much more than someone else. Let's say the Iron Woman, Margaret Thatcher, or the Angela Merkels, women who could run the country and make the progress and understand and be feminist at the same time, taking care of equality in all the development of today's world. My personal role model is the former, up to the last year, president of the World Federation of Engineering Association. I mean Marlene Kange, unbelievable woman who came from India, and she was telling to us 2 years ago, girls, there is no things you cannot. Everything is possible. Trust me. When I came from India to Australia, the only thing I had my engineering diploma in my hand. And she went to the position of the top engineer of the world, you know. So this is to me a role model. If you really want to rise up, you have to imagine that is. So I'm so happy to meet people like that. And of course, role models, I could say, for example, another women engineer, a friend of mine, Yvette Ramos, who is from France, but coming from Portugal and working in Switzerland. And we opened a new NGO in an engineering, women engineering, working for new projects for women and for environment using artificial intelligence and engineering. So this is completely new approach, fantastic knowledge, unbelievable spirit. We have no funding, but we meet, we make projects, we make academy for young children, for students, for older engineers. This is the power, you know. So today's role model is not, please listen to your father because he has to be right. You know what, my grandmother, she was educated, lovely person. I loved her, but she was telling me when I was criticizing my father, like a person, you know, like a girl, like a teenager, saying, oh, you are not right because I know better. And she was telling me, Lydia, even if it was black, I had to say it's white if my husband, if your grandfather said it's white, you know. So it was a lesson to beloved granddaughter. This is not role modeling for me today, you know. All those stereotypes just killed for at least 50 years the development. We already had education. I mean, we women, we had education, we had skills, we had knowledge, we had energy, but we were sad that it's not for girls. So to me, someone who showed it is for girl. I mean, I was even I was asked to be a role model to many people, and especially to make some groups of young scientists to play as a role model and someone who will develop and help career. But that's not like me. I mean, the power of women who really can rise to the top. This is a role modeling. Thank you for that.
That's beautiful, beautiful, Lydia. Renata, would you like to weigh in?
I would, thank you. And I've been enjoying hearing the other stories of Lydia and Afiwe, so thank you very much for those. I want to go back to just something about parents. You mentioned parents being activists, and I just wanted to clarify, my parents' version of activism was taking their places and taking their spaces. So having gone to college, their belief and their version of activism was, I'm going to go into the workforce and I'm going to do my best, and I expect to have the level of respect that goes along with the work and the time and effort that I put into this. And they fought to make sure that they were respected in those spaces, and that we could get, as my brothers and I have 3 brothers, that we could then get into the different places and spaces where they thought that we should be and deserve to be, based on hard work and education and those kinds of things. Many times it worked, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes they had to fight in that way. So they weren't always necessarily the subversive types of activists. They were activists in, you know, I'm going to go for that promotion. I'm going to get my children into these, opportunities because of these things that happened in the past, or they might challenge people who tried to challenge them. So I also have to just share that my father was the one who told me I was going to be an engineer. And he told me that women could be engineers, and he told me that I was going to be a doctor, whatever it was, MD, PhD, that I was going to be that. He told me that, for example, as an African-American who has, curlier hair, that my hair was fine and it was beautiful and I didn't have to worry about, other standards of hair. So little things like that. Yes, he's a role model. My parents are role models. But another thing I think that is important is that for me, my role models, I'm going to change it a little bit to people of influence, because I've had people who've been people of influence on the, I would say, entire arc of wealth, privilege, and opportunity. And sometimes in places and spaces that might not necessarily seem high and lofty. So I'll give an example. My parents, I think, instilled, and some of this is because of our faith background and growing up in church and so forth, but a sense of humility to recognize and appreciate all people. And so it was important to be able to recognize the role model of the person who might be a janitor cleaning floors during the week, and then on Sunday morning have on the suit and the dress and the hat and be in a sort of place of reverence, in the church, who would then tell you, who might only have a high school education, but then would tell me, you're going to college and, do a good job. And I remember the ladies in church giving me handkerchiefs with coins inside saying, here, you take this, right? And so little things like that were really, really important. Another thing that sticks out in my mind, and just sort of on the arc of privilege, when I went to college at Howard University, I lived in Washington, D.C. And in my third year, I lived in an apartment in the city. And I was determined to be on my own and to not really take my parents' money by this time. So I lived where I could afford. And the place that I could afford with a roommate was in an area that wouldn't be necessarily considered to be that safe. It wasn't the pristine neighborhood. But what was interesting about that was people in the neighborhood who nicknamed me College Girl. And so they would say, study hard, college girl. There were people, there was I guess you could term it the red light district. And so there would be people who were on the street at night, and they would be there in the morning. And they would, on a Sunday, they would say, you on to church? Say a prayer for me, college girl. If they saw me coming late from the library, and the bus driver in the city would actually take me up to the front door. So instead of stopping at the bus stop, because I was the last stop, the bus driver would actually go up to the front door of my apartment and drop me off. And the people who were there outside, who were making their living outside, would say, did you study hard, church girl? And did you study hard, college girl? And I was like, yes. And they said, study hard, college girl, because you need to do it. And so those, I remember those stories. And I remember when I moved and my parents came to pick me up, and all these people came to say goodbye. And my parents were just looking around saying, who are all these people from all walks of life who are coming? And they would say, that's our college girl. That's our college girl. And so, it just reminds me again that there are people who can be of influence in your life from all walks of life. And it reminds me of making sure that there are structures in place that are going to recognize talent and excellence in all forms. And some people don't necessarily have the opportunity. So how can we create opportunities? And there's actually a theory called science identity. And science identity talks about recognizing yourself in a role, but also having others recognize you in a role and others affirm you in a role. And in that particular theory, I've sort of taken it both ways. So there are people who recognize you in the role who are not in the role and who may not, because of life circumstances, ever be in the role. And then there are people who are in these roles of privilege and power that you might want to aspire to, who see you as maybe being a future person in the role. And I have had people to do that for me. So Sharon Tikane, for example, who is a past president of the GEDC, I met her literally at a breakfast table in Italy at a conference where I was giving a talk of one of my early on going to international conferences. She sat down at my breakfast table, and I was eating, we were eating, I think, pancakes and solo. She wasn't having pancakes. I was having pancakes. I think she was having fruit. But she just affirmed me and said, you're going to be a leader and you're going to do a great job. And here she is, you know, at the time, I think she was president of a university in Turkey. And I was just blown away that she was even talking to me, breathing the same air that I was breathing. And I was just really excited to even meet her. So to have her in her position, speak to me, talk to me, have breakfast with me, and then affirm what I was going to do in the future was life-changing. For Maria Larondo Petri to be the executive director of LOCSE, to say, I want you to come to this country and I want you to say something. I want you to be in Cartagena with me in an IFEES meeting and sit next to me so that you can see how these things work. For other women to say, I'm going to invite you to UNESCO and I want you to give a talk. It's just amazing that women have been able to, and others have been able to use their power to then empower others. And I hope that I'm able to do the right thing along that line. And I'm trying to do that same thing in my own sphere, if you will, to put other people in different places to affirm and empower them so that they can go on and do other things that are going to be even greater than what I can even hope for.
Yeah, great story. So you are a role model for others. I see that Deborah is leaving us already. Just moved to another place. Do we have
And here I am still.
no?
Hang around.
Sorry.
No,
So like I said,
before.
I'm multitasking as, you know, I'm making it work like women do. I'm making it work. So I'm at a conference center and the room I was in has got a meeting that's starting at 5. And so they asked me to leave. So now I'm going to put my headphones on.
Okay.
Let's
So you
see
might want to
here.
think about wrapping up slowly, Debbie.
Yeah. Okay, Krishna, I will. So now I've got my headphones on, which means that I can take a seat instead of letting everybody in the atrium hearing. So here I am again. And I think what I've been hearing is that the distance between the distance between role models and ourselves and our colleagues and our friends. And I actually think that this maybe speaks to the essence of being a woman. We hold each other up and we find our networks and we tell each other, you're doing well. Renetta, I read in your story when Seren sat next to you and listened to your story, and she said, you are a leader. And these people that see you and for whom you bring hope. I think that this is really what women in engineering bring to engineering, is the hope and the evidence that holding hands together, sitting around a table, being wholehearted, being vulnerable, being real is powerful. And that's what I see and hear. Yes, Lydia.
I need to tell you a very, very short story, which is from yesterday. You know how situation is. Krakow is a former capital, beautiful city, plenty of universities, but it's something like 750 inhabitants. So up to 1 million together with incoming students. And now we have over 1 million of refugees coming from Ukraine, just in the city. And the city is full all people are engaged, I mean private people without organization even, in making any help, in taking them home, in bringing food, but the capacity of the city is at the top, as our president of Krakow said today. And what my university is opening, can you imagine? This is some of the, let's say, role model as an idea, as institution. These are not women only doing, but just men. 98% of those people coming from this million are women with children. So young women, sometimes mothers, so older women, and 2 or 3 or 4 children. They usually even take children from sisters, etc. Men are not allowed to leave the country they are fighting. And now it's 2 weeks of the war, and we have over 1 million. The statistics, they say that up to 5 million refugees will come. And what my universities announced and organized yesterday, we will open courses of civil engineering and transportation in Ukrainian language right now for Ukrainian people, because they will need to rebuild their country. And we are looking for some extra teachers, because the first grade will be in Ukrainian language, the second half and half, and the third will be already in Polish, because there is not enough staff who could be like that. And this is the way how to encourage people. You know, these are the big steps of humanity toward women. Can you imagine what disaster they are coming from for, and the chance to find a job for them here is even bigger than to give them food, you know, because we may afford to have food or to organize some beds, but to make them feeling, okay, you are able, so you can become an engineer, and your career and your life will be different than just a poor refugee who is, I don't know, cleaning at another homes or whatever. It's not the same path like, let's say, it was in the United States before, in 100 years ago, with color people, okay? Because they had to come very, very long way. And we think that these are great initiatives. So if you, in your countries, in your neighborhood, in your organizations, have a power to help to these Ukrainian brave women who are coming, escaping just to save life, and to work as engineers if they are, and to study if they started before, we'll be very happy to cooperate on that. Yeah.
Thank you, Lydia. And Lydia, I'm sure that this is something that we can through IFEES. Hans is online, Hans Hoyer, who I'm sure you all know as the director of IFEES. And I know that there are people around the world who will want to give up their time to help our sisters out there. So we are now 1 minute past 5 in South Africa, and this brings us to the end of this webinar. And I want to just again thank the panelists for their open-hearted and real stories. And this is how change happened. This is how hope is sparked in the hearts of women all over the world. And I also want to mention, I haven't mentioned them yet, but my parents too are also role models for me. I also come from a big family, 5 girls and a boy. And so I also want to pay homage to them. And thank you everybody for participating. I think that rounds us up today. And remember, these webinars happen on a monthly basis, celebrating different women's journeys. So thank you so much.
Was it recorded or not?
It was recorded, and it will be on the website.
It is recorded. You will all get a copy of the recordings.
All of that and send it us, okay?
Hans will be doing the closing comments. Hans, come in.
Well, I'm just powerfully, personally, and emotionally, not only intellectually, inspired by the 4 of you. It's very special, very beautiful, and thank you, Lydia, also what you said in terms of what is going on in Ukraine and in Poland, and the solidarity that we are seeing in Poland and the surrounding countries. Very, very powerful. It is definitely recorded. We will work very diligently to share this conversation in a more even aggressive way to our global community. And as you indicated, we've got to, both IFEES and GEDC have made a statement, obviously expressing our deep concern on what is going on and impacting the Ukrainian society. We can do more, and that's obviously a different conversation. Just the other, I'm just very emotionally inspired by the four of you. It's a privilege for me to know you and to work with you. Just for others that are joining us here, we're working on our 5th and 6th editions of the Rising to the Top with outstanding women leaders in the MENA Arab world and Southeast Asia. I just want you to know that I'm working with them closely. So hopefully we can get this published, both of the volumes. By the time we meet together with Deb and Apiwi this November in South Africa, in Cape Town, our global conference, I just want to let you know what's very important. Obviously, intellectual leaders like all of you, but the new generation of students are important to engage them, not only from South Africa, but globally. So just put this on your agendas and we'll have other opportunities to talk more about it. Both four of you are inspiring, special colleagues, friends, and leaders. I'm very much touched. Thank you kindly for your presentation.
So thank you, everybody.
But
Thank you so much for inviting us.
You are my role
Thanks,
model
everyone.
also, in the way how to do things like that. Just one question. To me, it would be absolutely fantastic. I know that it's online, but I would love to have a paper copy of the book. Is it possible to get?
Yeah, we can get a transcript. Yeah.
We can work, Lydia. I'm making note to get a copy with. We'll find a way. Just send to me your address, please.
Of course,
You
yes,
have my email. We are connected, and
this is something else.
Maybe also for our listeners, the books are available. If you go to the IFEES website, ifees.org, the books are all available to order either a hard copy or an ebook via the IFEES website. It redirects you to the publishers.
thank you.
But it's expensive to us in Poland now. We rather.
I will find a way to get a book to you. You send me your address, my sister. Okay.
I will. Thank you.
Okay.
Peace be with you.
Continue
Peace
your
be with all of you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
I'll see you in
Bye.
South Africa in November.
Absolutely.
Can't wait.
Sure.
Excited about
Bye.
that.
Bye bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.